So Tamer, over to you. Mintus builds AI systems, agentic deep learning for data cleansing and risk management and decision-making at financial institutions. What's the hardest part of proving value when you're dealing with fragmented decision-making and fragmented legacy data?
Yeah, thank you. So we're a UK company, and as you said, work with the finance and real estate sectors. And we have a platform that's a multi-agent AI platform, which means like we use deep learning, analytics, and GenAI to bring the fragmented data across organizations to make decisions. Our biggest differentiation is that we work with PhDs from Stanford and University of Chicago, although we're a UK company, and bringing human in the loop into decision making is one of the biggest differentiators, because it's all AI, one thing, but when you bring human beings into the loop, the performance goes up 45% at least, and then especially on risky decisions, it goes all the way up to 79%. And the other interesting thing is that, like, listening to a couple of conversations today, Nurul Rubini said that EU was like a museum, which was quite interesting. We're about like 10 to 15 years behind US in that sense. And amount of money, investment, research goes into AI here compared to the rest of the world is quite interesting. And then if you take like the big guys like the BlackRocks and everybody else of the equation, there's still 30 trillion assets under management. So there's a huge opportunity, but they don't know what to do and they don't know how to do it. And then there's a lot of interesting change management. So I think it all starts with there's so much data across the organization. There are silos. How do you get to that fragmented data, build it into a one unified database where you can use various AI tools to come to decisions on that one is the question that we're trying to answer. And then with the goal, it cannot be a POC. It has to be like a deliverable result. So how do you actually improve the performance on investments or what have you? Or how do you reduce the cost is the thing that we're trying to answer. So moving from that POC to real life applications is the biggest thing, because the moment you prove that, it becomes such a no-brainer.
Great. I love those comments. It sounds like the previous panel resonated with you in terms of the investment going into AI. How do you stay competitive given you're across the pond? It does sound like you got some US counterparts. Yeah. And then after that, moving from POC to production, what are some tips or what are some real life examples, anything you can provide the audience in terms of contexting and tips and tricks of the trade, let's say?
I guess the biggest difference between US and the UK in that sense, there is abundance of money over here. With those big bets, you get big results. In UK, there are a lot of bootstrappers. So you build things on a kind of like smaller budgets, smaller teams. But once you've proven your model, there is more sureness, success that you have. So, and I guess it kind of like fits the market's needs. Also, the market, moves, a little bit, smaller and everything else. And they're still quite fragmented in they're all kind of local, although everything has become global, but financial institution and real estate still, local markets. The second part of your question is that it's always typical life of a startup. You get so many opportunities, you have very few hours. How do you prioritize? How do you go after the right customers? I guess the biggest challenge comes from that, you can finish a proof of concept, and it takes about 12 months to get to a contract. So when I was at Microsoft, that was not a problem. You can make the investments and everything else. But with a startup, you have to measure that, timing very nice. It's a constant, balance act. But that's what makes, startups quite exciting in a way. You live always on the edge, but once you, make it and create a differentiation.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks so much for that.